Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Ramanaaya.
Michael?
Yes?
I mean, I may be wrong, but your picture has disappeared and we only have the mountain.
I'll start the video again. Oh,
There we
now
go. Yeah,
I've reappeared.
Yeah.
Such is the nature of ego, appearing and disappearing. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Ramanaaya. Today I'm going to be talking about verse 7 of Śrī Aruṇācala Akṣaramaṇamālai, and that was Sadhu that what I just played was Sadhu singing that. From this verse, Bhagavan is really getting down to the very heart of what Akṣaramaṇamālai is all about, which is about our struggle to turn within and to be as we actually are. The nature of the mind is to run outwards. But what we are seeking is just to be as we actually are. So this is a struggle between our outward-going inclinations, our viṣaya-vāsanās, and grace, which is giving us the love just to cling to our own being and to be as we actually are. So that is the topic of this and so many and in various different ways of so many other verses of Akṣaramaṇamālai. What Bhagavan sings in this verse is uṇaiyē māṭṛi, ōḍādu, uḷattiṉmē, uṟudiyāy, iruppāy, Arunachala. What that means, very briefly, is Arunachala, may you be firmly on the mind so that it does not run, deceiving you. There are some alternative meanings also, but I will talk about those a little later. The first word of the verse is uṉaiyē, which is an accusative form of the second person singular pronoun, so it means you. And then ēmāṭṛi. ēmāṭṛi is an adverbial participle that means deceiving, cheating, tricking, defrauding, or confusing. So uṇaiyē māṭṛi means deceiving you or cheating you. Then the next word is ōḍādu, which is a negative adverbial participle, but literally means not running. But in this context, it's used in the sense of for not running or so that it does not run, it meaning here the mind. So uṇaiyē māṭṛi ōḍādu means so that the mind does not run, deceiving you. The next word is uḷattiṉ, which is an inflected form of the word uλλam, which means heart, or in this context, mind. Uλλam can mean heart or mind, but in this context, it means the mind. And uڵattiṉmē, male means above or on or upon or on top of. So uڵattiṉmē means on the mind. Uṛudiyā is a noun that means firmness, strength, or stability, and uṛudiyāy is an adverbial form of it, so it means firmly or steadily. Then the verb, the main verb, iru, means to be, to exist, remain, stay, wait, sink, sit down, or be seated. The main meaning is to be or to exist, but these other meanings are also there. And iruppāy is the form of the verb here. That's a second person singular future form of it. So it literally means you will be. But here it's used in the sense of iruppāy aha, that is as an optative or polite imperative. So it's a prayer, may you be, or may you sit down firmly. Along with uڵattiṉmē, uṛudiyāy, iruppāy means may you be or may you sit down firmly on my mind. And so the whole verse is uṇaiyē māṭṛi ōḍādu, uڵattiṉmē, uṛudiyāy, iruppāy means may you be or sit down firmly on my mind so that it does not run, deceiving or cheating you. The teaching implied in this verse is therefore do not run, just be. That is what Bhagavan is implying here. That is, our aim when we are following Bhagavan's path is not to run about here or there, but just to be as we actually are. When he talks about running, that's the mind. That means the mind running. So that the mind doesn't run outwards. May you, Arunachala, be seated firmly on it, or be firmly on it. So, what does he mean in this context by running, and what does he mean by being? In brief, running is the nature of the mind, whereas being is our real nature. And in this context, running means going, as I say, it's the mind running, so it means going outwards, away from ourselves towards other things. Whereas being means remaining as we always actually are, resting in the heart without ever going out to do anything or to know anything other than ourselves. Though this teaching, do not run, just be, which is addressed to us as mind or as ego, is implied in this verse. It is expressed in the form of a prayer addressed to Arunachala, asking him to be firmly upon us so that we do not run outwards, associating with anything other than ourselves, thereby cheating him, like a fickle and unfaithful wife cheating on her loving and caring husband by spending her time being intimate with other men. When we allow our mind to go outwards, when we run outwards, attending to anything other than ourselves, we are like that unfaithful wife. We are being unfaithful to our beloved Lord Arunachala, like a wife associating intimately with other men. That is the implication here, because this is the underlying bhava of this song. It's more explicit in some verses. It's implicit in other verses. It's not neither implicit nor explicit in other verses. But the underlying bhava is the bridal bhava. Bhagavan is the young girl who has come, or who has Arunachala has entered her home and has eloped with her, dragged her out and brought her to the cave of his heart, as he said in an earlier verse. So now that young girl is waiting for their union, but in the meanwhile, her mind is fickle, going out here and there. So the prayer is, you be firm on my mind so it doesn't run outwards. So the implication is, just like an unfaithful wife who goes and associates with other men, this mind goes outwards and associates with things other than ourselves, other than Arunachala, who is our own real nature. So that we do not run outwards in this way, cheating on him, he should sit firmly on us, or sit firmly on our mind. But the nature of the mind is to run outwards. So we cannot just be as we actually are without the grace of Arunachala. That's why Bhagavan expresses this in the form of a prayer, asking Arunachala to be on our mind, because it's only by his grace that we can have sufficient love to cling firmly to our own being, I am, and thereby just be as we actually are. Arunachala is our own being, so his being firmly on our mind and our clinging firmly to our being are not two separate states, or not two separate things. They're just two ways of describing the same state. He will not be firm on our mind or sit down firmly on our mind until we are willing to submit ourselves, surrender ourselves entirely to him. But we cannot. We will not surrender ourselves to him without great love to do so. So whatever willingness or love we have to submit to him is only by his grace. His grace shining in our heart is what we experience as the love to turn within and just to be as we actually are. That's why I say he's sitting on our mind, and our clinging to our being, they're one and the same thing. And Therefore, when Bhagavan prays, ōḍā duڵattiṉmē uṟudiyāy iruppāy, Arunachala, may you be seated firmly on my mind, so that it does not run outwards towards anything else. What he implies is, may you shine so clearly and steadily in my heart, but my mind is drawn inwards to cling firmly to you with heart-melting love, instead of running outwards in accordance with its fickle and unfaithful nature. Why does the mind run outwards? Because it is seeking happiness in things other than itself. But real happiness doesn't, as Bhagavan teaches, real happiness doesn't lie in anything other than ourselves. Real happiness is our true nature, which is Arunachala. So out of his grace and compassion for us, he is drawing our mind within to experience the real happiness that we're all seeking, but which till now we've been looking for in the wrong place. So Arunachala is always shining clearly and steadily in our heart as our own being, I am, but we've failed to recognize the nature of his being and shining thus because of the outward running nature of our mind. So long as we are looking outwards, we overlook the fact that he is shining in our heart. So he needs to shine within us in such a way that our mind is drawn inwards, like a needle being drawn towards a magnet, as he prays in verse 16 of Akṣaramaṇamālai. What he says in verse 16 is, Kāntami rumbupol kavandene vidamal kalandeno yiruppāy Arunachala. That means Arunachala forcibly seizing me like a magnet seizing iron, uniting without leaving, may you be with me. That means may you be eternally one with me. So without ever leaving me, may you unite with me and may we be ever one. But that is, for that, he needs to attract us, draw us to him, like a magnet draws a needle towards itself. Because without that inward drawing power of his grace, we will continue running outwards. It's only when he draws our mind within and gives us the love to turn within to see what we actually are, that by giving us the love to turn within to see what we actually are, he is drawing our mind within. It's only when he does so that we will stop running outside and therefore stop cheating on him. That is the implication. So the attraction has to come from him. So Arunachala being and shining in our heart in such a way that our mind is drawn inwards to see him alone, and thereby the mind is thereby prevented from running outwards to roam about in the world of objects or phenomena, is also what Bhagavan prays for when he sings uṇaiyē Arunachala in the next verse. That is verse 8 of Akṣaramaṇamālai. Uṇaiyē means show your beauty. Arunachala, show your beauty. So what he sings in the next verse is Usuṭrulam bidādu uṇai kandu adangira uṇaiyē Arunachala. That means Arunachala, so that seeing you uninterruptedly, the mind which uninterruptedly roams about the world will subside, show your beauty. That is, it is only when he shines in such a way in our heart that our mind is drawn within to see his beauty, but we will cease running outside and we will continue seeing him, looking at him, attending to him uninterruptedly. Then only the mind will cease its roaming about in the world. So that the mind whose nature is to roam about in the world, so that this mind will subside by seeing you uninterruptedly, show your beauty. So Bhagavan is constantly, what Bhagavan is is indicating to us in so many ways in these verses, is that the driving force behind all our sadhana, all our abhyasa, all our spiritual practice is his grace. Without his grace, we will not have the love to turn within and to seek him within our own heart. So Arunachala is Atma-swarupa, the real nature of ourself, and its nature is just to be, without ever rising to do anything or know anything other than itself. It is therefore immutable, and hence it is called Achala. Achala means unmoving, motionless. As Bhagavan says in the first sentence of the 7th paragraph of Nana, Yatharthamai uڵattiṉ Atma-swarupam andre. What actually exists is only Atma-swarupa. And it is Atma-swarupa. Atma-swarupa means the real nature of ourself. It is that which is our own real nature, but Bhagavan refers to in these verses as Arunachala. So since nothing other than Arunachala actually exists, it is ekam eva advitiyam, one only without a second, and hence it is infinite and therefore formless. We are therefore never anything other than Arunachala, but when we seemingly rise as ego, we limit ourselves as the extent of a body, which is a form consisting of 5 sheaves, but we mistake to be I. So we seem to be something other than Arunachala. That is, he is our own real nature, but because he is infinite, and we, by rising as ego, have limited ourselves as a finite form, we seem to be something other than him. Since we have limited ourselves as the form of a body, we consequently become aware of numerous other forms, all of which seem to be other than ourselves. As Bhagavan points out in verse 4 of uڵudiyā, what he says in verse 4 of uڵudiyā is, Uruvam tānayin uluhu paramatran. If oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. That is, why do we see this world as a multitude of forms? And why do we see God also as a form? Why can we not truly conceive of God as formless? Because we have limited ourselves as a form. Even when we have an idea, a belief, God is formless, that very idea that we have of God being formless is itself a mental form. So we cannot know God as formless so long as we know ourselves as a form. But if we know ourselves as formless, in other words, if we know ourselves as we actually are, we will no longer see him as a form. We will see him as our own real nature. So in the next sentence, he says, Uruvam tan andrel, uvatrin uruvatei, kan urudal, yavan evan. That means if oneself is not a form, who can see their forms how? Kannalal kakshiondo. That literally means, can the seen, what is seen, be otherwise than the eye? The eye means the EYEI. That is, whatever is seen is of the same nature as what is seen. So if the seer sees itself as a form, it will see everything else as forms. But the real eye in the sense of EYE, here Bhagavan's using the word I as a metaphor for awareness, but the real I is oneself, the infinite I. Whatever is infinite is formless. So, but what Bhagavan implies is our real nature is formless awareness. And therefore, in the view of our real nature, Arunachala is not a form. Arunachala is nothing other than ourself. Since we cannot rise, stand, or flourish as ego without grasping the form of a body as ourself, and then grasping other forms as the objects of our experience, the very nature of ourself as ego or mind is to be always grasping forms of one kind or another, whether those forms are relatively gross, such as the physical forms of the universe, or relatively subtle, such as the mental forms, the thoughts, feelings, perceptions, memories, so on. And we cannot subside or cease so long as we continue to grasp forms. The only means, therefore, by which ego can subside in such a way that we will never rise again is to cling firmly to ourself alone. That is, we as ego will subside only when we cling to ourselves, firmly to ourselves, to our own being. As Bhagavan implies in verse 25 of uڵattiṉ. What he says in verse 25 is, uruppatri undam. He's talking about ego here. Uruppatri undam means grasping form, it comes into existence. Uruppatri nikam, grasping form, it stands. Uruppatri undu mika ongam, grasping and feeding on form, it flourishes abundantly. Uruvittu urupatram, leaving form, it grasps form. Tedinal otam pidikam. Tedinal means if seeking or if sought, it will take flight. That means if it seeks itself, if it investigates itself, if it seeks its own nature, it will take flight. Such is the nature of, as he says, uruvatra peya hande. Uruvatra means formless. Pay means a ghost, a phantom, or an evil spirit. Ahande, ego. So the ego he's describing as a formless phantom or formless evil spirit. And then he ends by saying or means investigate or know. So since ego is a formless phantom or evil spirit, whatever forms it grasps are things other than itself. That is, because it's formless, if it grasps forms, those forms must be other than itself. So in this context, uru, form, means anything other than ego, namely any object or phenomenon. In other words, anything that can be distinguished in any way from any other thing is a form of one kind or another. So long as ego is grasping the form of a body itself and consequently grasping other forms as its food or nourishment, it endures and flourishes. But since it has no form of its own, if it tries to grasp only itself, it will subside and dissolve back into its source, namely Satchit, pure being awareness, which is the fundamental awareness of our own being, I am. As Bhagavan implies by saying, Tedinal otum pidikam. If sought, it will take flight. Since ego cannot rise, stand, or flourish without grasping form, its very nature is to have strong inclinations to grasp forms. And these inclinations are what are called viṣaya-vāsanās. Viṣaya-vāsanās means inclinations. Viṣayas means objects or phenomena. So viṣaya-vāsanās means inclinations to seek happiness in and therefore attend to or seek to experience viṣayas, objects or phenomena. The nature of ego, therefore, is to constantly run outwards and wander under the sway of its viṣaya-vāsanās. So clinging to our own being and thereby being as we actually are is contrary to the very nature of ourself as ego. However, though clinging to our own being is contrary to the nature of ourself as ego, it is our real nature. So it is only by the grace of Arunachala, who is our real nature, that we can be as we actually are. That is, so long as we continue rising and rising as ego, our nature is to go outwards. So without the grace of Arunachala, without Arunachala drawing us, attracting our mind back within, we will continue running outwards, seeking happiness in things other than ourselves. Because when we rise as ego, we have limited ourselves. What we actually are is infinite happiness. But when we limit ourselves as the form of a body, we can no longer, we have seemingly become something finite. So as a finite thing, we cannot experience infinite happiness. So the very nature of ego is to be dissatisfied. We are dissatisfied because we seem to be lacking happiness. Since happiness seems to be lacking in ourselves, we seek it outside. So the mind is constantly going outwards, thinking if I get this, if I get that, then I'll be happy. If I have more money, I'll be happy. If I have a better job, I'll be happy. If I study and learn more, I'll be happy. If I have, if my friends and relatives are kinder to me, if they're more loving and affectionate to me, I'll be happy. So we're constantly seeking happiness in things other than ourselves because it seems to be lacking in ourselves. But happiness is not lacking in ourselves. There's no happiness in other things. True happiness lies only within ourselves. So it's only by going within that we can find happiness. But because the nature of the mind is it's a very, from the perspective of the mind, it always seems that happiness is something other than itself. So it seeks it in things other than itself, in things other than itself, by external things, in other words. So the nature of mind is to be constantly going outwards. That's what the significance of the word ōḍādu, not running. That is, the nature of the mind is to be always running outwards in search of happiness in this thing or that thing. Outwards means not only out into the physical world, even the thoughts of the mind, even whatever goes on in our mind, all the thoughts, feelings, emotions, perceptions, likes, dislikes, and so on, all these are external to ourselves, extraneous to ourselves. So this allowing our mind to move away from ourselves, from our own being, is allowing the mind to run. So in order to stop running, we need to hold on to our own being. And to hold on to our being, we need all-consuming love, just to be as we actually are. So it is only by the grace of Arunachala, who is our own being, that we can gain the love to turn within and be as we actually are. It is not by doing anything that Arunachala enables us to be as we actually are, but just by being as he actually is, which is why Bhagavan prays in this verse, uڵattiṉmē uṟudiyāy iruppāy Arunachala. Arunachala, may you be firmly on my mind. He's not asking Arunachala to do anything, but just to be as he is, to be firmly on the mind, to shine in the mind so clearly, but our attention, our mind is drawn back within, to shine so clearly in our heart, but our mind is drawn back within. But Arunachala, in order to draw us back within, Arunachala need not do anything, because Arunachala is not only pure and infinite being, but also pure and infinite love. Because he does not see us or anything else as other than himself, so he loves us and everything else as himself. His love is therefore without any limits, so it is just by his existing and shining in our heart as our own real nature that he gives us the love required to cling firmly to him and thereby to be as we actually are. Why then do we seem to be devoid of that love, or at least deficient in it? Since he's always existing and shining in our heart as our own being, I am, should we not always have all-consuming love to cling firmly to him? Yes, we should have, and in reality we do have, but that is our real nature always has love just to be as it actually is. So we as we actually are always have love to be as we actually are. But we seem to be lacking such love because we have risen as ego. And so under the sway of our viṣaya-vāsanās, we allow our mind to run about outside, and hence we overlook the presence of Arunachala in our heart. Therefore, in order to recognize his presence in our heart and thereby be drawn within with all-consuming love for him, we need to try persistently to look within instead of allowing our mind to run about outside under the sway of its viṣaya-vāsanās. The more we look within, the more our love to look within will grow. By persistently trying to look within and thereby holding on to our own being, I am, we are yielding ourselves to Arunachala. We are surrendering ourselves to Arunachala. And the more we surrender ourselves to him, the less we are obstructing his aruṇācalā, the working of his grace. That is, so long as we're allowing our mind to run outwards, we are obstructing his grace. Because what is the work of his grace? The work of his grace is to draw our mind back within. So if, like naughty children, we insist on running around, playing about outside, instead of staying at home, we are obstructing his work, which is drawing our mind back within. So we need to play our little part. We need to try to turn within. As Bhagavan says in the 12th paragraph of Nana, God and Guru are in truth not different. Just as the prey that has been caught in the jaws of a tiger can never escape, so those who have been caught in the glance of Guru's grace will certainly be saved by him and will never be forsaken. Eninum Guru Kartiya Varipadi Tavaradu Nadikavendam. Nevertheless, it is necessary to follow unfailingly in accordance with the path shown by Guru. That is, everything is being done for us by grace. But for grace to do its work, we need to cooperate by surrendering ourselves. And we can surrender ourselves most effectively by turning within and trying to hold on to our own being, I am. By holding on to our being, we are thereby subsiding. To the extent to which we subside, his grace is free to work unobstructed, to draw our mind back within. So he's doing his part. We need to do our part. We need to cooperate with him. But even when we're doing our part, it is only his grace that is doing that. That is, it is only his grace that is drawing our mind inwards to face him alone. So it is only by his grace that we can surrender ourselves to him. There's a very famous line in Shiva Puranam. Shiva Puranam is the first song in Tiruvāsakam, sung by Manikavasaka. That line is often quoted, is Aruṇācalā Aruṇācalā, which means worshipping or bowing down to or surrendering to him only by his grace. But there's another line before that people often overlook, but that is the key to understanding, because in the previous line, Manikavasaka gives the reason for this. He says, Shivan Avan Enchintayul Nindra Adanal. Since Shiva is always standing or abiding or existing in my heart, only by his grace can I worship him. That is, he is shining in our heart. Only he can have only by his grace can he draw our mind within, because the nature of the mind is always to go outwards. So we can truly worship him, we can truly surrender ourselves to him only when he draws our mind within. But in order for him to draw our mind within, we have to cooperate. We need to at least try to turn our mind within. That is yielding ourselves to his grace. That is cooperating with his grace. So that is what Bhagavan means here when he talks about him being seated firmly on our mind. So it is only by him being seated firmly on our mind that we can be as we actually are, and thereby cease running outside forever. So his being firmly on our mind means he's shining clearly in our heart in such a way that our mind is drawn within inwards. So this is what he implies by uṉaiyē māṭṛi ōḍā duڵattiṉmē uṟudiyā yiruppāy Arunachala. Arunachala, may you be seated firmly on my mind so that it does not run about outside, deceiving or cheating on you. The first clause of this verse, as I said, is uṉaiyē māṭṛi. This can be interpreted in two ways. The first and most obvious way is to take it as uṉaiyē ēmāṭṛi. Uṉai, as I explained, means you, and ēmāṭṛi means deceiving, cheating, or tricking. So uṉaiyē ēmāṭṛi means deceiving you, cheating you, or tricking you. But it can also be split another way. Instead of splitting it as uṉai, ēmāṭṛi, we can split it as uṉaiyē, māṭṛi. Uṉaiyē is an intensified form of uṉai, so it means you or you yourself. And māṭṛi is a transitive adverbial participle that means changing, altering, or transforming. So uṉaiyē, māṭṛi means changing you, altering you, or transforming you. As I said earlier, Arunachala is Atma-vichara, our own real nature, which alone is what actually exists, and which is therefore infinite, eternal, indivisible, and immutable. So it can never actually be changed, altered, or transformed in any way. However, when we rise as ego and thereby allow our mind to run about outside under the sway of its vasanas, in the view of ourselves as Arunachala, we seem to be a subject, a knower, knowing a vast multiplicity of objects or phenomena, things that are known. Therefore, since Arunachala alone is what actually exists, what we are seeing as the subject and the multitude of objects is actually only Arunachala. So by allowing our mind to run about outside, we seem to have changed Arunachala, the one, into all this multiplicity. That is what Bhagavan means here. So it is this seeming transformation of Arunachala, who is one only without a second, into all this multiplicity and diversity, that Bhagavan refers to in this verse when he sings, uṉaiyē, māṭṛi, ōḍādu, uڵattiṉmē, uṟudiyāy, yiruppāy. That is taking the verse in this sense of uṉaiyē, māṭṛi, transforming you or changing you. It means, Arunachala, may you be or be seated firmly on my mind so that it does not run about outside, changing or transforming you, implying by seeing you as all this multiplicity. By allowing the mind to run outside, we are seemingly transforming Arunachala in another sense also. That is, the nature of Arunachala is pure being. But by rising as ego and thereby allowing our mind to run about outside, we are seemingly transforming being into rising and doing. As pure being, Arunachala is not actually affected in the least by the appearance of any amount of rising, running, or doing, which occur only in the view of ego, the false rising I. So being is never actually transformed into rising, doing, running, or doing. But as ego, we mistakenly see our being, I am, as rising, running, and doing. I have risen, I am running, I am doing. So whatever we may be doing, our being is not affected. We always, whether we are doing nothing or doing many things, our being remains the same. We cannot do anything without being. And whether we do anything, as in waking and dream, we're constantly doing actions by mind, speech, and body, or in sleep, we are not doing anything. But in both states, we are. Our being remains unchanged. I am remains unchanged. So the transformation of being into doing is not a real transformation. It's a mere appearance. It's totramaত্ৰ. It's only in appearance that there seems to be a change, but our being seems to have been changed into all this doing. Therefore, in order to put an end to this illusory appearance of rising, running, and doing, by enabling us to see our real being as it always actually is, Bhagavan prays to Arunachala on our behalf, uṉaiyē, māṭṛi, ōḍādu, uڵattiṉmē, uṛudiyāy, iruppāy, Arunachala, meaning, Arunachala, may you be seated firmly on the mind so that it does not rise to run about outside, implying that I'm really implication into it here. So it does not rise to run about outside, incessantly doing actions by mind, speech, and body, thereby seemingly changing you, the one real being, changing you as all this, or changing you into all this rising, running, and doing. There's another meaning also that is given by Morgana, or hinted at by Morgana, that is the wording of this verse also suggests another metaphor, namely a rider controlling an unruly horse by sitting firmly upon it. The mind is like an unruly horse, so if it is not firmly controlled by its rider, it will run away, throwing the rider from its back and thereby becoming free to roam wherever it wills, which in the case of the mind would be to run after all the allurements of the world. That is, the word māṭṛi, it means not only changing, it can also mean removing, dispelling, repelling, or expelling. So in the case of a horse and a rider, it implies the horse throwing the rider from its back. Therefore, when viewed in the light of this metaphor, uṉaiyē māṭṛi ōḍā duڵattiṉmē uṟudiyāy iruppāy aruṇācalā also implies or suggests, Arunachala, may you be seated firmly on the back of this horse, namely my unruly mind, so that it does not run away out of control, expelling or rejecting you by throwing you off its back. So that's also, that metaphor also adds more, that is, the words in Bhagavan's verses are very, very simple, but often they suggest so many different shades of meaning. I mean, essentially this meaning isn't different to any of the other meanings, but by bringing in this metaphor of an unruly horse, it lends another dimension of meaning to this verse. The essential meaning is the same, but the imagery is different. A horse running about out of control and throwing its rider, that is different to the these are very subtle meanings. Sometimes Morgana brings out very subtle meanings that are not immediately obvious until they're pointed out to us. Then we can see how fitting this metaphor is to this verse, though we may not notice it at first. But anyway, the central idea in all three interpretations of this verse that I've discussed here is the same, namely that the outward running nature of the mind can be curbed and redirected to sink back within only by the grace of Arunachala, who is what is always existing and shining clearly in our heart as our own being I am. And his drawing our mind back within to face himself alone, and thereby to sink and merge forever in him, the heart, is what Bhagavan describes metaphorically as him being or sitting down firmly on the mind. Just as he, in another verse, in verse 7 of Arunachala Paticam, he describes this same thing metaphorically as Arunachala placing his vast lotus feet on the head of ego, the spurious I who has risen or come out as if it was something other than him. This verse 7 of Arunachala Paticam, well, all Bhagavan's verses are beautiful, but this is a very, well, we can't see any verse of Bhagavan without thinking, oh, this verse is very special. Every verse of his is very special. What he says in verse 7 of Arunachala Paticam is, Bali baliti ne mampala huira virivaru puda paudikangal velioli unnai andriin drenin veruyan ar ulan vimala Veliadai uڵattiṉ verara bilangin ver ena veli varuvain veli vara Arunachala veri varai Arunachala avantalayil virimala Padacchēdam vete. What that means is Bali Balitine Mampala Buira Viriburu Buddha Bodhi Kangal Veli Uṇai Veli Oli Uṇai Andri Indru Enin means if the elements, the Buddhas, the 5 elements, namely space, air, fire, and water, and the Bodhikas, that means everything composed of those elements, which spread out or expand or unfold as many living beings, do not exist apart from you. So if all these things do not exist besides you or other than you, and he describes Arunachala as Veli Oli Uṇai. That means the space of light. That implies light here, implies the light of pure awareness. So he's the space of pure awareness. So if all these things are not other than him, or they don't exist apart from him, Veru Yan A Ulan. Who else am I? That implies who else am I other than you? How can I be anything other than you? If everything is only you, how can I be something other than you? And then he addresses Arunachala as Vimala. Vimala means blemishless. He's addressing Arunachala as blemishless. Vimala. Veliadai ulatu berara bilangin. If you are shining without another in the heart, shining without another means he is ekameva advaitiyam, one only without another. So he's shining without anything. There's nothing other than him, and he's always shining in the heart. If such is the case, which obviously it is the case, veru ena veli varuvein a. Who else am I? Sorry. Who am I who come out as if another? That is, as when we rise as ego, we seem to be something other than Arunachala. But if there's nothing, if he is the infinite whole, there cannot be anything other than him. So who am I who have risen as this, as if other than you? And then he concludes this verse in the last line with a prayer. Veli Varai Arunachala. That means come out Arunachala. That means manifest yourself, show yourself to me. It implies by drawing my mind back within. He comes out by it's not literally coming out, but he reveals himself to us by drawing our mind within. So that's the implication of Veli Vara. Come out, because every line of this verse begins with the word Veli. Veli means space, but he's using it in so many different ways. So here, Veli Vara means coming out. But then the main prayer is Veli Vara Arunachala Aban Talayil Virimala Padacchēdam Beite. That means placing the vast lotus feet on his head. What that implies is his head. Aban here refers to the one who's coming out as another, in other words, ego. So placing your vast lotus feet on his head. What that that means on the head of ego. So this ego, but he's rising as another. He should place his vast lotus feet on the head of this ego. So this is another metaphor that Bhagavan is using here. It's very close in meaning and imagery to this uڵattiṉmē uṟudiyāy iruppāy. Iruppāy, as I say, means may you be, but it also implies may you be seated, or may you be firm upon, or may you sit down upon. So just like he prays to Arunachala to place his vast lotus feet on the head of ego, in this verse of Akṣaramaṇamālai, he's praying to sit firmly upon the mind. So the implication of both of these is the same. So as I say, this is a very, very beautiful prayer. We are nothing other than him, but we seem to have risen as other than him. So it's for him to show himself to us, and thereby place his vast lotus feet on the head of this ego, so that it is crushed, like in one of the Puranic story, I think Mahabali. I've forgotten the exact story, but anyway, Mahavishnu appeared and crushed the demon with under his lotus feet. That is what is implied here. Like that, this demon ego needs to be crushed under the vast lotus feet of Arunachala. Oh yeah, I remember the story is he prayed for what could be covered with 3 feet of Vishnu. So that was the earth, the sky, but then where else is the 3rd foot? It is upon his head. And so Mahabali prayed to Vishnu to place his feet on his head. I think so. I can't remember the exact details of the story, but anyway, it's a very nice story, but it implies the same thing that Bhagavan is alluding to here, which is placing his feet on the head of ego and thereby crushing this ego. So we will only cease rising when he places his lotus feet on our head and thereby crushes us, or when he sits firmly upon our mind. However, we have to do our part, as Bhagavan often emphasized. So though we need to try persistently to turn our mind back within to see what we actually are, which is Arunachala, we can do so only by his grace, because the nature of the mind is to constantly run about outside, seeking happiness in transient phenomena, instead of sinking back within to find it in the one thing that exists and shines eternally, without ever undergoing any change whatsoever, in all times, in all places, and in all states, namely Arunachala, the infinite light of pure being awareness, I am. Looking back within to see what we actually are is not difficult, but it does require all-consuming love. And the source of that love is Arunachala, who exists and shines deep within our heart, as Atma-vichara, the real nature of ourself. So it is only by his grace that we can gain the love to turn back within and place our head under his vast lotus feet, invite him to place his vast lotus feet on our head and thereby crush this ego. So in all these prayers, in whether it's Arunachala Akṣaramaṇamālai or Padacchēdam or Navamani-malai, Ashtakam, what Bhagavan is constantly praying is for the crushing of ego, for Arunachala to sit firmly on this mind so that it stops running outwards and cheating on him. By cheating on Arunachala, we are cheating ourselves, because Arunachala is our own real nature. Arunachala is the sole source of true happiness. He lies within our heart. By allowing our heart to go outwards, we are seemingly cheating on him, but the one we are truly cheating is ourselves. So that we may cease cheating ourselves, he needs to place he needs to sit firmly on our mind so that we subside back into the heart. Or as he says in the next verse, he needs to show his beauty to us so that the mind will be enchanted by him and see him constantly and thereby subside back within. So this is the theme running throughout all of Bhagavan's works, whether it's the Upadesha works such as Upadesha uṇaiyē, uڵadu naptu, nana, Amma-vichara, Apalapatu, Ekama Panchakam, and such works, or whether it is the devotional work such as Arunachala Stuti Panchakam. Throughout Bhagavan, there is one common theme. The root cause of all our problems is our rising as ego. That is what we need to put an end to, and for that we need to turn within. But in order to turn within, we need all-consuming love to do so. And that since the nature of the mind is to go outwards, we can get such love not from the mind, but only from deep within our heart, from Arunachala, who is our own real nature. So it is only by his grace that we can succeed. So as Bhagavan concluded, final verse, verse 5 of Atma-vichara, aruṇācalā, grace is also necessary. Purnamē, have love or be adorned with love. In other words, we need to cherish love to turn within in our heart. That is, the love to turn within is the love to yield ourselves to grace, to receive his grace in the fullest measure. And then he finally says, immutable, happiness will appear, because happiness is our real nature. And we can experience that happiness only when, by his grace, by the all-consuming love given to us by his grace, we turn within and merge back into our source. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Ramanaya.